Okay, let's unpack this. We go through our days trusting blindly, really, that when we send a text, buy a coffee, or log into our bank, that information is secure. It feels solid. It feels modern. But what if I told you that the entire foundation holding all of that up, well, it isn't code from last week. It's not even from this century.
It's a bit of a shock when you realize it. I mean, we think of cybersecurity as this futuristic, high-tech field, but if you strip away all the layers, the screens, the silicon, and you dig down to the absolute bedrock, you don't find new tech. You find ancient arithmetic.
And that is exactly what we are doing today. We're looking at a comprehensive German report titled The Foundation of Arithmetic and Its Digital Fortresses.
Oh.
Or, for those who want to practice their pronunciation.
Oh, here we go.
Das Fundament der Arithmetik unserer digitalen Festung.
Which is a very dramatic title, but honestly, it's entirely accurate.
It is. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty wild. We're going to trace this one thread that starts with some pretty abstract number theory, then moves into what the source calls the DNA of numbers, sees how that helped build a planetarium in the 17th century, and then, well, then we're going to talk about the Quantumpocalypse.
Right. We're moving from the elegance of geometry to this existential threat of quantum computing. But the link between them is stronger than you might think.
I love how this report frames it. It feels like we're discovering that math is actually a weapon.
It can be, but I think the better frame, and the one the report leans into, is that this is a story about trust. How do we mathematically prove that a secret is safe? And what happens when the math we've relied on for decades suddenly cracks?
Let's get into that bedrock. The report starts with something called Bezout's identity. Now, I see identity and I think of spies, but this is a theorem.
It is. It's a fundamental theorem. It sounds complex, but it's actually about the architecture of whole numbers. The core formula is x(x) plus by I day.
Okay, hold on. Flashbacks to high school algebra. Let's ground this. What are we actually looking at here?
So imagine you have two whole numbers. Let's call them A and B. Could be anything, 12 and 15. Bezout's identity basically says that if you take the greatest common divisor of those numbers, that's D, you can always represent that divisor as a linear combination of A and B.
A linear combination meaning just mixing them together.
Exactly. You can multiply A by some integer x and B by some integer y, add them up, and you will hit that greatest common divisor. Exactly. You won't miss.
The report had this really cool visual metaphor for it. Described a grid or a lattice.
Yes, that's the geometric interpretation, and it helps visualize why this matters. Imagine a piece of graph paper, an infinite grid of points. If you start at the center and you use your two numbers as like the only directions you can move, Bezout guarantees you can reach specific points. You aren't just jumping around randomly. There's a structure to where you can land.
So it's not just dry theory. It's telling us that numbers have a predictable geography.
Precisely. It defines the ideal theoretical structure of integers. It tells us that numbers aren't just a heap of sand. They have a grain, like wood. And if you cut along the grain, you get neat results.
And to find those cuts, the report mentions a tool, the extended Euclidean algorithm, which sounds like a very boring movie sequel.
It is the unsung hero of cryptography. The normal Euclidean algorithm that just finds the divisor, it tells you what the connection is. The extended version keeps a parallel set of books.
Like a forensic accountant.
In a way. While it's crunching numbers to find the divisor, it's also calculating those coefficients, the s and t, to solve the equation. And here's why that matters. It is incredibly efficient. It works in logarithmic time.
Which means it's fast.
Blazingly fast. I mean, you can use it on numbers that are 40,096 bits long numbers, so huge our brains can't even comprehend them, and this ancient algorithm solves them in a snap. That efficiency is why we can have secure connections on a phone without the battery draining in 5 seconds.
Okay, so we have the bedrock, Bezout. Now here's where it gets really interesting. The report shifts to something called continued fractions. And the expert in the text calls this the DNA of numbers.
This is one of my favorite concepts. We're so used to decimals, right? Pi is 3.14159 and so on. But the report makes a provocative point. Decimals are just artifacts of our biology.
Because we have 10 fingers.
Exactly. If we were, cartoons with 8 fingers, our math would look totally different. Decimals are arbitrary. They're cultural. But a continued fraction, that is the number stripped naked. It's independent of base 10. It describes the intrinsic complexity of the quantity itself.
The visual they used was a ladder.
Yes. Think of it as descending into a well of precision. You have a list of numbers, and each number tells you how long a section of the ladder is before you have to turn and go deeper.
To make this stick, we have to walk through the nut example from the source. This actually made it click for me. I think every listener needs this aha moment.
It's a brilliant didactic tool. Let's do it.
Okay, so picture this. We have a guy named Nut. Nut has 67 rare Lego bricks, and he wants to pack them into boxes that hold 29 bricks. He wants to describe the ratio of 67 to 29 perfectly, using only whole numbers.
Right. No decimals allowed. He wants the integer DNA of that relationship.
So step 1. Nut looks at his pile. How many 29-sized boxes can he fill with 67 bricks?
That's easy. 2 boxes. 2 times 29 is 58.
But he has leftovers, a remainder of 9 bricks, so the first number in our DNA sequence is 2. Now, usually we'd say 2 point something and stop, but Nut does something clever.
This is the twist. He inverts the problem. He stops looking at the bricks and starts looking at the empty space.
Right. He flips it. He asks, how many of my remainder, that's 9, would fit into the box size I just used, which was 29?
So 29 divided by 9.
That fits 3 times. 3 times 9 is 27. The remainder is 2, so our second number is 3.
And he just keeps doing this flip. Now he takes the previous remainder, 9, and divides it by the new remainder, 2.
9 divided by 2 is 4. Remainder 1. Third number is 4.
One last flip, 2 divided by 1.
That's 2 exactly. Remainder is 0. We're done.
So the code, the DNA of that ratio is 2, 3, 4, 2.
That feels like magic. We took a messy fraction and turned it into this clean list of integers.
And what's powerful is that this list allows you to rebuild the number with what are called convergence. If you just take the first number, 2, you have a rough estimate. If you take 2, 3, you get a better one. They're partial truths that get closer and closer to the real number.
And this isn't just a party trick for Nut and his Legos. The report takes a hard pivot into history here. We go from Lego bricks to a planetarium.
Christian Huygens, the 17th century. This is where abstract math meets heavy metal engineering.
So Huygens is building a mechanical model of the solar system, a planetarium. But he has a problem.
The problem is that nature is messy. The time it takes Saturn to orbit the sun isn't a nice round number relative to Earth years. The ratio is approximately 29.46. And it goes on forever. It's irrational.
And you can't build a gear with 29.46 teeth. You need whole teeth.
Exactly. You need integers. Now, he could have built a gear with, say, 1,000,000 teeth to get it precise, but that would be the size of a building. He needed a gear that would fit in a box but still be accurate.
So he used continued fractions.
He did. He calculated the DNA of Saturn's orbit, and he looked at those convergence we mentioned, those partial truths. He found a sweet spot. The convergent was 59 over 2.
59 over 2, that's manageable.
Very manageable. It translates to a gear ratio of 118 teeth to 4. He scaled it up a bit to make the teeth stronger, but that approximation was incredibly precise, yet mechanically simple.
He did the same for Mercury, right?
Yes, for Mercury, he found the convergent 33 over 137. So a 33-tooth gear driving a 137-tooth gear.
That is so cool. He used the DNA of numbers to find the best possible compromise between mathematical perfection and physical reality.
It connects the abstract to the concrete. Continued fractions allowed him to minimize error while keeping the machine buildable. It's an optimization algorithm hundreds of years before computers.
Okay, so we've got the bedrock and we've got the DNA. Now let's fast forward to the modern day, because the report takes a turn here. It calls this section the double-edged sword.
This is where we see that the same math that builds planetariums can destroy secrets.
We're talking about cryptography, specifically RSA.
Right. RSA is the encryption standard that ruled the internet for decades, and it relies on something called the modular inverse.
Which connects back to Bizou.
Directly. Remember, x plus by article is 11 null. In crypto, we aren't dividing numbers. We're working in a loop, like a clock face. We need to find a number $6 so that when you multiply it by x, you get one letter wrapping around that clock. That $6 is your private key.
So to generate the private key, the thing that keeps my bank account safe, you use Bizou's identity.
Correct. If you generate that key properly, it's secure. But here's the vulnerability. To make decryption fast-like on those old smart cards, people wanted small private keys. It saved computing power.
Lazy engineering.
Or just constrained resources. But in the 90s, a researcher named Michael J. Wiener looked at this, and he realized something terrifying. He proved that if your private key, let's call it D, is too small,
How small?
specifically less than 1/3 of the fourth root of the modulus n.
Okay, that sounds technical, but what's the consequence?
The consequence is that the private key, your deepest secret, inevitably appears as one of those convergents in the continued fraction expansion of your public key.
Wait, so the public key, the thing I give to everyone,
Yeah.
contains the DNA of my secret key.
Only if your secret key is too small, but yes. It's like Wiener weaponized nuts Lego logic. An attacker doesn't need to try 1 trillion passwords. They just calculate the continued fraction of the public key, unfold the list of convergence, and boom, one of those numbers is your secret key.
That is wild. It reduces the time to crack the code from millions of years to... what?
Milliseconds. It's instantaneous. It's a perfect example of how a deep understanding of structure, the DNA, can bring a fortress down.
Math is a weapon, indeed. But Wiener's attack assumes you made a mistake. You picked a small key. The report then moves to a threat that doesn't care if you did everything right.
The quantum threat.
This is Section 5, the Quantumpocalypse.
The central figure here is Peter Shor. In 1994, he published an algorithm, Shor's algorithm, that uses quantum physics to find the period of a function.
And finding the period is bad.
In this context, it's catastrophic. RSA relies on the fact that factoring huge numbers is hard. It's the one thing conventional computers are terrible at. Shor proved that if you have a quantum computer, you can use this period finding to turn factoring into an easy problem.
So RSA is dead.
If a sufficiently powerful quantum computer is built, yes. RSA and the math that secures the internet today evaporates. It becomes as easy to read as a postcard.
But we don't have those computers yet, right? So why are we panicking now?
Because of a concept called HNDL. Harvest now, decrypt later.
That sounds like a horror movie title.
It's a nightmare scenario for intelligence agencies. Hackers and nation-states are stealing encrypted data now. They can't read it yet. It's just gibberish. But they are storing it on massive servers. Waiting
for the quantum computer to be built.
Exactly. Once that technology arrives, they can unlock everything they stole 10 or 15 years ago.
The report mentions Mosca's theorem to explain the timeline. It frames this anxiety mathematically.
Right. It's a simple inequality x plus y, z.
Let's break that down.
X is the shelf life of your secret. How long does it need to stay private? For a credit card, maybe a few years. For a state secret or genetic data, maybe 50 years.
Okay. And why?
Y is the migration time. How long will it take to update every server, satellite, and ATM in the world to new quantum-safe encryption? That takes a huge effort.
And Z?
Z is the collapse time. How long until the quantum computer actually arrives?
So if my secret needs to last 25 years, X, and it takes 10 years to fix the systems, Y.
That's 35 years. If the quantum computer Z arrives in 15 years, you have a problem. 35 is greater than 15. You're already compromised.
That is a sobering thought. We are already in the danger zone. So what are we doing about it? The report talks about the NIST competition.
Yes, the National Institute of Standards and Technology launched a global contest to find post-quantum cryptography, or PQC. They wanted algorithms that even a quantum computer couldn't break.
And this brings us to a tale of failure and success. Let's start with the failure because it's a huge lesson. Tell me about Psych.
Psych. Super singular isogeny key encapsulation. It was a top contender based on incredibly complex math involving isogenies between elliptic curves. It looked bulletproof because the math was so hard.
Complexity equals security.
Right. That was the assumption. But in August 2022, two researchers, Kastrick and DeCreux, completely broke it.
Did they use a quantum computer?
No, that's the irony. They used a regular laptop.
A laptop, like a consumer laptop you buy at a store.
A single core on a laptop running for about an hour. They didn't use quantum physics. They used a theorem from the 1990s, Kani's theorem, that everyone had just overlooked.
So this future-proof algorithm was taken down by a piece of math from the 90s and a generic PC.
It's a stark reminder. Just because the math is complicated doesn't mean it's secure. If you don't understand the underlying structure, you're vulnerable.
But there was a winner, right? The report mentions Kyber.
Yes, Crystal's Kyber, now known as MLChem. This is the new standard, and it works very differently from RSA.
How so?
It uses lattice-based cryptography, specifically the learning with errors problem.
Learning with errors. I like the sound of that.
Think back to Bezout. We had clean linear equations. X plus by a D death. Kyber is like solving a massive system of those equations, but someone has added a tiny bit of noise, a small error, to every single one.
So it's fuzzy.
Deliberately fuzzy. To find the secret, you have to filter out that noise. And it turns out filtering that noise out of a high-dimensional grid is incredibly hard, even for a quantum computer.
Yeah.
It's like trying to find a pattern in static.
So we're replacing the perfect factoring of RSA with noisy equations.
Uh,
What's the trade-off?
Speed versus size. Kuiper is actually much faster than RSA. The report says key generation is like 3,000 times faster.
Wow.
But the keys are physically larger. In terms of kilobytes, they're much heavier to send across the wire. So the internet might get a tiny bit slower in terms of data transmission, but the math happens instantly.
So let's wrap this up. We started with ancient history and ended up in the quantum future.
It's a continuous thread. We started with x to x plus my will's d gross. That simple equation led us to the extended Euclidean algorithm. That algorithm gave us the tools to understand continued fractions,
Which Huygens used to build his planetarium gears.
and which Wiener used to break lazy RSA implementations.
And now, as we face the quantum threat, we are moving to learning with errors.
But notice the pattern. The tools, Euclidean algorithm, lattice structures, they aren't obsolete. Kuiper is lattice-based. We are just adapting these ancient tools for new, hyperdimensional defenses.
The DNA of numbers is still running the show.
It is. We just have to be careful how we read it.
So here's a final thought for you listening. We saw with Psych that a perfect system fell to a regular laptop because of an overlooked theorem. And we saw Huygens use math to approximate the messy reality of the solar system.
Right.
As we rush to implement these new quantum-safe shields, are we absolutely sure we haven't overlooked another classic theorem? Could there be a dusty book in a library somewhere with a formula that brings Kuiper down, just like Connie's theorem brought down Psych?
That is the question that keeps cryptographers up at night. True security isn't about the newest tech. It's about how deep your understanding goes.
And on that comforting note, thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll see you next time.